$262 billion. That's the cost of Trump's latest move against the European Union and Canada. With a single decision, the US has escalated trade tensions to a level unseen in decades, slamming tariffs on steel, aluminum, and a host of consumer goods. But here's the real question. Is this a master stroke of economic strategy or a reckless gamble that could push the global economy toward chaos? The European Union calls it economic warfare. Canada sees it as a betrayal of Western alliances. And Wall Street? Markets are already reacting. Stick around because this isn't just about trade. This is about global power, shifting alliances, and the very foundation of Western economies. And by the end of this, you'll know exactly who wins, who loses, and what happens next. Trump didn't just wake up and decide to wage an economic battle. His administration argues that the United States has been taken advantage of in trade deals for decades. Let's break it down. European tariffs on US goods are significantly higher than US tariffs on European products. The EU imposes a 10% tariff on American cars, while the US charges just 2.5% on European vehicles. Canada's dairy tariffs are sky high. Some exceed 200% on certain American products. The US steel and aluminum industries have suffered massive losses, with jobs being lost to cheaper foreign imports. The Trump administration sees this move as a way to level the playing field. But will this actually work? Markets and world leaders don't seem convinced. The S&P 500 dropped 1.4% on the announcement. European stocks tumbled, and investors are bracing for further retaliation. Are the US, the European Union, and Canada heading toward an economic war? It sure looks that way, and if history tells us anything, this won't end peacefully. The EU has retaliated, slapping tariffs on Harley-Davidson motorcycles, Kentucky bourbon, and peanut butter. Canada has imposed $16.6 billion in counter tariffs on US steel, aluminum, and consumer goods. Ursula von der Leyen, president of the European Commission, warned that this is an assault on free trade. And here's the real problem. Trade wars don't just hurt politicians. They hit businesses, workers, and everyday consumers. The last time the US tried something like this, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. It collapsed world trade by 66% and worsened the Great Depression. Could history repeat itself? Trump's argument is simple. The United States has been on the losing side of trade for too long. His administration points to unfair tariffs that disadvantage American exports, massive government subsidies in the EU that protect European industries, and Canada's protectionist trade policies, particularly in agriculture. But is he right? Yes, to some extent. The EU does subsidize agriculture at a high level, nearly $65 billion annually. Canada's dairy system does block US competition with heavy tariffs. Europe taxes US tech companies billions, while American firms struggle for equal market access. However, the United States also has its own protections. Billions in subsidies for US farmers, protectionist tariffs on Chinese goods, and strict limitations on foreign airline carriers. So, while Trump has a point, the bigger question is, will these tariffs actually fix anything? The EU isn't holding back. Officials in Brussels argue that Trump's tariffs violate WTO agreements and risk unraveling decades of trade stability. What's their response? They filed a formal WTO complaint against the United States. They've imposed counter tariffs on $50 billion of US exports. Germany has warned that US-EU relations could be permanently damaged, and they're not alone. Japan, South Korea, and even Australia are watching closely. Why does this matter? Because if this spirals out of control, it won't just be a US-EU trade war, it'll be a global economic crisis. On the surface, tariffs seem like a battle between governments, fought with economic policies and trade figures. But the consequences hit the ground fast and hard. For American manufacturers, this isn't just an adjustment, it's a financial crisis in the making. Take Ford and General Motors. Both automakers are bracing for steel and aluminum costs that could add billions to their supply chains. Ford's best-selling F-150 truck. Experts estimate that price tag just jumped by nearly $2,500 overnight. Car buyers looking to make a purchase in the coming months could face sticker shock. But the real pain isn't just at the dealership. Infrastructure projects across the country, bridges, skyscrapers, factories are about to get more expensive. The National Association of Home Builders has already warned that rising steel prices could increase the cost of new homes by thousands. And while the White House argues that these tariffs will protect American jobs, major manufacturers have a different take. U.S. Steel and Alcoa are getting a short-term boost, but small and mid-sized manufacturers relying on imported metal could face closures. This isn't just an abstract debate. It's about whether factories in Michigan and Pennsylvania will keep their doors open. And if history tells us anything, that decision could come sooner than most expect. Trade has always been political, but Trump's tariffs take it to a new level. Supporters argue that this is about national security and economic fairness. They claim that decades of unfair trade deals have left American industries gutted, manufacturing jobs outsourced, and domestic production weakened. But critics see a different story. A move designed to energize Trump's voter base ahead of an election year. There's no denying the political calculus. Steel-producing states like Pennsylvania and Ohio are critical battlegrounds. By taking a hard stance, Trump positions himself as a defender of blue-collar America, reinforcing the message that only he is willing to stand up to foreign powers. But there's a risk. If these tariffs spark mass layoffs in U.S. manufacturing due to rising production costs, that political win could backfire. The question is no longer whether tariffs can protect American jobs. It's whether they'll cost more jobs than they save. Trade wars don't happen in isolation, and Trump's decision forces the European Union into an uncomfortable position. Will Brussels stand with Washington, or will it hedge its bets and deepen ties with Beijing? This isn't speculation. China is already moving to capitalize. Chinese trade officials have reportedly held meetings with EU leaders to discuss stronger economic partnerships. And the timing isn't accidental. Since the US-China trade war began, Beijing has been working aggressively to position itself as the more stable trading partner. China has offered the EU better trade terms on high-tech goods, promised easier market access, and even hinted at favorable financing deals for European companies looking to expand into Asia. If the EU pivots toward China, it could signal a massive shift in global trade alliances, one that leaves the US increasingly isolated. So the real question isn't just whether these tariffs will hurt Europe. It's whether Trump has inadvertently handed China a golden opportunity. Trump's argument for tariffs hinges on one idea, that the United States can afford to go it alone. But can it? Right now, the European Union isn't just a trade partner. It's part of a carefully balanced Western economic system that has kept markets stable for decades. If the EU turns away from Washington, the fallout could extend far beyond tariffs. Already, European leaders have begun questioning their economic reliance on the United States. Some analysts warn that an extended trade war could push the EU to accelerate efforts to reduce dependence on the US dollar. If European countries begin shifting reserves into alternative currencies, like the Chinese yuan or even a new European payment system, it could undermine the dollar's global dominance. That's not just an economic headache, it's a geopolitical earthquake. If allies start looking elsewhere, the United States risks not just trade disputes, but a permanent loss of influence in global markets. Markets hate uncertainty, and tariffs create plenty of it. Within hours of Trump's announcement, the Dow Jones dropped 600 points. The The volatility spread worldwide. European stocks tumbled, the euro weakened, and Asian markets braced for more disruption. The message from Wall Street was clear. Investors don't like what they see. But this isn't just about stocks. The broader economic impact could be severe. If trade slows between the United States and its largest partners, GDP growth could take a hit. Supply chains are already feeling the strain. Companies that rely on international imports are seeing costs surge. And while some businesses might absorb the initial shock, others will be forced to pass it on to consumers. Inflation fears are creeping in, and some economists warn that if these trade tensions escalate further, a recession isn't off the table. But before that happens, a much bigger decision looms on the horizon. What happens next? Negotiation, escalation, or full-blown economic conflict? There are 3 paths forward, and each comes with its own risks. Path 1. Negotiation. If the United States and the EU agree to new trade talks, there's a chance for a compromise. Some European officials have signaled a willingness to discuss tariff adjustments, but only if the United States shows flexibility. Path 2. Retaliation. If the EU and Canada continue escalating counter-tariffs, the economic damage could spread rapidly. More tariffs mean higher costs. Higher costs mean weaker growth. And weaker growth means greater market instability. And then there's Path 3, the worst-case scenario, a full-scale trade war. If neither side backs down, if new tariffs keep piling on, and if global markets continue spiraling, this could evolve into a crisis that impacts every major economy. But here's the real question. Who's willing to blink first? The United States has a strong hand, but Europe isn't folding. And behind the scenes, other global players are watching, waiting, and preparing their next move. Because this isn't just a war of tariffs. It's a war of alliances. And some nations are already choosing sides. Who's backing the United States and who's ready to cut ties? That answer might change the course of the global economy. We're glad you're enjoying this video. Please like and subscribe. Check out another video that is now on your screen.